Our next guest is Marisa Thalberg, the Executive Vice President and Chief Brand and Marketing Officer at Lowe's. Marisa is responsible for leading the marketing organization and innovating on new ways to inspire and engage customers. Marisa is a globally recognized, award-winning business strategist and brand-building innovator, known for inspiring teams to take brands to new heights of cultural relevance and business performance. Welcome, Marisa.
Thank you, Andrea. Hi, Gary.
Hi, Marisa. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you.
Thanks for joining. Let's paint a little bit of context for everybody listening, a little bit maybe about your personal journey in becoming this really, for everybody's watching, because I know there's a lot of pockets. I've referenced it 10 times in this episode. This is a real powerhouse in our world, so I'm really excited you're here. So maybe a little context of your journey.
Sure. I think you have this idea when you're young that it's going to be a straight line, and mine has been anything but, and it's interesting to sort of be at this point as if it was all meant to be. It didn't feel that way at all. First of all, I never even saw myself as decidedly going into business. I was always more of a creative, did the performing arts in high school, wanted to go into broadcast journalism, actually did that for a little bit. Started my career in advertising. But I think what I found early on in taking some interesting left turns and veering around a little bit was that there was, sometimes people are quick to see the dissimilarities between things you do when they're different. And I always find it more interesting to find the common threads. So when I jumped from advertising to try out broadcast journalism, people were like, well, what are you doing as a producer here? We've been doing this for years. And I was like, well, I kind of learned in advertising how to think about audiences and tell stories. And I think that's what I'm doing here too. So it's kind of the same. You just have to teach me the technical language. And I realize without that having been so overt, that that's probably helped shape my ability to then have a career in beauty, to then suddenly become a leader of digital marketing in beauty, to go to become the CMO of Taco Bell, and now become the CMO of Lowe's. They're not completely expected turns, but that's what makes life interesting and intellectually stimulating. And when you compare your fresh perspective with people that do have the longevity and institutional knowledge, it can be quite a really great alchemy.
What about the earliest parts of your career? Like when you were in high school and after that, and then, I'm going a little top of the head here. You did spend real time in agency land too, right? Like that was a little bit of the...
That's how I started my career for several years.
Was that a good training ground? Did you realize there very quickly, like, even though I've been doing this for 11 years, I realized on day one, being on the client service side is way less fun than being on the brand side. What were some of the kind of, in those early days at those shops, was there something that was a real big lesson?
Well, I think that back then, and it was a while ago, the whole strategic plan or account planning function hadn't really come over from Europe yet. So being in account management, even now I realize at a very young age, I was doing some really rich central strategic work in terms of how to set up like portfolio equity across Clairol and its respective sub-brands. I was like 25 and I was doing that. So in that sense, it was excellent. And I went through their management training programs, and I ran their management training program, first at Saatchi, then at J. Walter Thompson, the two agencies where I spent those early days. So yes, I think I got incredible. I also worked on some real blue chip packaged goods businesses, and it was great. I struggled even then with the idea that I was working in a career and in a company where people were called creatives, and I wasn't one of them. So I was sort of having a very angsty, existential, kind of like you do in your 20s. Who am I? What does this mean? How can I be both? Why can't I be both? But I also realized I did want to orchestrate the whole thing. I didn't just want to be feeding a part in. But it was, for me, it was really the creativity that's been the driver, less so the traditional business school route. And I think that just shows that you can defy conventions and expectations more so today than perhaps before, if you're a good learner and a good energized participant and leader and have vision, and you bring that forward. And then part of, I think, was also always molding jobs to be more what I wanted them to be. somehow, and very much in service to what the business needs, or what, so that doesn't sound completely self-absorbed. I mean, but it's seeing the opportunity and seeing my strengths and changing how I contributed to actually maximize my contribution is, I think, what I mean to say there.
Paying attention to culture, something that's come up in some of our jams through the years.
Oh yeah.
How do you see that statement in the macro for everybody listening? And B, how has that changed, accelerated, declined, different in this COVID landscape?
I mean, it's one of my, I think it's where I gravitate as a leader, but I've had this observation from the earliest days of my career, and to this day, it's still what I love about being a marketer is I can't think of any other career that does sit more at this intersection of business, psychology, and culture. And I think if you pull any one of those dimensions away, you're not really fully doing the job. So that culture leg of the stool is enormously important, because brands and the products and services that are sold underneath them are a part of the fabric of culture, and understanding how to authentically, and I know that word feels really overused right now, but authentically, or you were saying with relevance, either participate in culture, or if you have a big brand, you might even be driving culture in a certain way, and doing that in a way that doesn't create the blowback factor of, no way, you're trying too hard. That's the art of how to move and play. And I love that part of it, because I do think that's so vital in terms of breaking through just, the conventions of advertising, so to speak, and allowing a brand to sit somewhere in consumers' brains and of course in their hearts, and just in a larger than life way, and start to shape and reshape what the meaning of those brands are in context. And of course, this year has certainly proved an exercise in that more than anything else.
That's for sure. Before you get out of here, I definitely want to get into Executive Moms, because I think it's such an important initiative, and I think a lot of people would love to hear about it. And I don't want to get too caught up in all the nerdy marketing stuff that I want to talk about. So
you can do both. I'll talk fast.
Good. So let's get a couple things in, but I really want to give you the opportunity to talk about that, because I think it's really important.
Well, I don't see myself as a natural entrepreneur. That's the funny part. I always admire people who are. I think what I realized over the years is I'm a really good entrepreneur. So I have an entrepreneurial spirit, but I like building it with context. And so the Executive Moms goes back to, and think about this, pre-social media, everyone. And I became a mom for the first time at the very end of 2000 in New York, freezing cold winter, like was so excited, but so overwhelmed, was the head of global advertising at Unilever Cosmetics International then. So very plugged into like the magazine world, the media world, and was saying, where are the working moms? Well, like I need, where can I connect? Figuring, the editor or publisher of Parents Magazine or someone would know. And everyone across the board was like, we don't know why this doesn't exist. Maybe you should go start it. And so there was a little bit of this accidentally falling into solving my own new working mom issues by giving myself a second career. Very dubious decision there. But as a marketer, I think you guys will appreciate that the name and the idea came to me right away, because the only other paradigm out there was Working Mother magazine. And I didn't feel that didn't sound like me. It sounded a little sad. Like I was like an executive, which is sort of serious and important, but that was a mom, which is warm and friendly. And I wanted to be both. And I wanted that dichotomy to live, I thought that dichotomy was interesting. And so the brand I knew right away, but suddenly I founded this organization. And what's funny is I knew I wanted it to be content, events, and community. And it just shows timing is everything, because a lot of people told me, oh no, you should go make it a magazine. And it's like, I don't think this is a magazine. So I was doing a daily email called Executive Memorandum, and we were having these big events. And I'll tell you something, I found myself in the center of the conversation around working mothers and an early social media influencer. So my Twitter handle is still Executive Moms. And it was fascinating because unlike most, and then this whole mom blogger thing happened. I'm like, well, I'm not one of those. I'm not a mom blogger. So it's funny how things got very niched. But what I was a multidimensional woman who, and I was thinking about things, not to say I was so ahead of my time, but maybe I was a little bit, because the idea of curating content, like no one said that then, but that's what it was for me, is I felt no one was curating for me as this, you know, and this is an oxymoron on purpose, this giant niche of women like me who worked, had careers, and were also parents. And I wanted to be talked to. First of all, I didn't want to be talked down to, and I wanted to be talked to as a whole person. And then I wanted human connection. So it was very fundamental. It's just nothing like that existed, and I had to go start it. And I did this. I ran Executive Moms very actively on top of my corporate career, and on top, of course, being a mom now 2 times over for 13, 14 years. And now it's sort of there, but it's frankly a little dormant. The website's there, the handle's still there, but I learned a lot in the process.
Have you thought about recruiting somebody to really, you know, I always think, you know, it's funny. I was going to ask you about this part because I did a little homework. Like, I've learned through the years of those moments where, like, I'm very okay with things to ebb and flow. To your point, it's not a straight line. Has there been any thought of the recruitment of somebody who's in the same place that you were 12 or 13 years ago that kind of wants to, maybe there's a program where like people sign up for 18 months of being like the queen bee, and then like might be something to think about. I'm happy to help if you want.
Yeah, it needs that. It does. Like this garden, like I just haven't tended this
I totally get it
as well.
What's great about gardens though is when they're established, when tended to, they can be quite beautiful.
I agree. And you know, like anything else, when you do it for the right reasons, I wasn't looking to go be a media conglomerate called Executive Moms. I made enough money through sponsors that mostly came to me to cover the expenses, but I realized it was my labor of love. And when you do things out of that reason, you do get paid in different ways. I mean, the connections I made, the relationships, and also it allowed me to have this other thing that I wasn't necessarily fixated on monetizing, right or wrong. And maybe that could have been a path, but you know, you make your choices and then you own your choices. And what I loved about it is I found a voice of something that I really, really cared about. And fast forward, here I am at Lowe's, and I was just before this, you know, working on a speech for our women's leadership conference that we're having, and thinking about everything I've learned over the years about being a woman in business and being a mom in business, and so many media stereotypes that I've sought to debunk, and research we did at the time. And, you know, I think the insights are real, and frankly, in some ways more important now than ever, because there's a lot of new research coming out that women, and moms in particular, are being disproportionately set back because of COVID, and the challenges of working from home, childcare and school being disrupted. It's disproportionate. So, you know, the agenda has probably been set back a little bit. And listen, as a manager of a large team myself, it's very hard to know how to help everyone while still doing right by the business. But I think it at least starts with empathy and showing that you care, and then trying to adapt. We're all trying to adapt.
For sure. We appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being a part of this.
You're welcome.